There is a store on the edge of town that I wish I had never walked into. Not because it is ugly, not because it is loud or crowded or unpleasant in any of the normal ways that superstores are unpleasant. No, Ravenwood Hypermart is none of those things. On the surface, it is perfectly ordinary, massive, clean, brightly lit. The kind of place you might stop at on a Friday evening to pick up groceries and cleaning supplies and maybe a bottle of wine and not think twice about. But I work there. I have worked there for 3 years on the night shift, and I can tell you with absolute certainty that there is nothing ordinary about Ravenwood Hypermart. Let me paint you a picture. It is 2:00 in the morning. The parking lot is empty. Not a single car except mine and the ones belonging to the skeleton crew inside. The fluorescent lights overhead hum with a frequency that sits just below the threshold of comfort, a thin, reedy vibration that you feel more in your teeth than you hear with your ears. The automatic doors slide open with a mechanical gasp, and the air that spills out is cold. Not the cold of air conditioning, something else. Something that carries a faint, wet smell like soil after rain. Like something old and damp that has been buried for a very long time. You step inside. The store stretches out before you in every direction, 14 aisles, each one wide enough to fit a small apartment, shelves stacked floor to ceiling with products that gleam under the overhead lights. Everything is in its place. Everything is perfectly organized. And the silence is the first thing that unsettles you. Not the silence of an empty building, the silence of a building that is holding its breath. I've worked here long enough to know the sounds this place makes, the way the heating system clicks on at irregular intervals, the way the ceiling tiles creak when the temperature shifts, the way, sometimes, in the dead of night when you are alone in an aisle restocking canned goods, you hear footsteps somewhere behind you, steady, unhurried footsteps that stop the moment you turn around. There is nothing there when you turn around. There is never anything there. But the footsteps come back. The other employees talk about it. Not openly, not during the day shift, when the store is full of customers and the overhead music plays and everything feels normal and safe and sane. But at night in the break room, over cups of coffee that taste faintly metallic no matter how fresh the pot is, they talk in low voices about the things they have seen. The cameras that glitch at exactly 11:47 p.m. every single night without exception. The shadows that appear on the footage, tall, shapeless shadows that move against the direction of the light source. The smell that drifts through aisle 7 without warning, sweet and thick and wrong, like flowers rotting in stagnant water. And the feeling, the feeling that you are being watched. Not by a person, not by another employee or a late-night customer or a security guard making rounds, by something else. Something that has been here far longer than the store. Something that was here before the concrete was poured and the shelves were built and the fluorescent lights were installed. Something that has been waiting. I did not believe any of it when I started working here. I was skeptical, rational. I told myself the other employees were stressed, sleep-deprived, prone to seeing patterns in random noise. I told myself the store was just a store. I do not tell myself that anymore. What I am about to share with you, the things that have happened inside Ravenwood Hypermart, are not rumors. They are not urban legends. They are documented. Some of them made the news. Some of them were buried. And some of them, the ones that happened when no one was watching except the cameras and me, have never been told to anyone. Until now. Pay attention. Because tonight I am going to tell you exactly what this store is. And by the time I am finished, you are going to understand why I have not quit. Why none of us quit. It is not because we do not want to. It is because I am not sure it will let us. Story 1, The Woman and the Shadow Man. It was a Tuesday night in October when Lena Morris walked into Ravenwood Hypermart for what she thought would be a quick trip. She needed conditioner, that was it, one item. She had been meaning to pick it up for days and had finally, at 10:30 p.m., decided to just get it done. The store was open until midnight. She had plenty of time. Lena Morris was 31 years old, petite, quiet, the kind of woman who kept her head down in public and moved through the world without drawing attention to herself. She worked as a dental hygienist. She lived alone in a small apartment on Clover Street. She had no reason, none at all, to be afraid of a superstore on a Tuesday night. The parking lot was nearly empty when she pulled in. A few scattered cars sat under the orange glow of the sodium lights, but most of them were clustered near the entrance. Lena parked farther out of habit, not intention, and sat in her car for a moment after turning off the engine. The parking lot was quiet. Too quiet. She noticed it immediately, though she could not have explained why it bothered her. There was no traffic noise from the road, no distant hum of the city, no wind. The silence was absolute and heavy, pressing against the windows of her car like something physical. She looked around. The other cars sat motionless. The lights overhead flickered once, just once, and then steadied. Lena shook her head, grabbed her purse, and got out of the car. She was halfway across the parking lot when she felt it. A prickling sensation at the back of her neck, the unmistakable primal awareness that someone was looking at her. She stopped walking, turned slowly. The parking lot stretched out behind her, rows of empty spaces, the sodium lights casting pools of orange and deep shadow between them. Nothing moved. No one was there. But the feeling did not go away. She stood there for 5 seconds, 10. The silence pressed in around her, thick and suffocating. Then she turned back toward the store and walked faster. The automatic doors opened. The cold air hit her. She stepped inside. The store was nearly empty. A single cashier sat at the front register, scrolling through her phone. A man in a blue jacket stood in the cereal aisle, reading the back of a box. That was it. 2 other people in an entire building the size of a warehouse. Lena headed for the personal care section, aisle 9. She found the conditioner she needed within 30 seconds, grabbed it off the shelf, and turned to head back toward the registers. That is when she saw him. He was standing at the far end of the aisle. Not walking, not browsing, standing, perfectly still. A tall man, too tall, she thought, though she could not have said exactly why that impression was so immediate and so strong. He was dressed in dark clothing, a long coat that hung past his knees. His hands were at his sides, fingers loose, and his head was tilted slightly to one side, as though he were listening to something no one else could hear. He was looking directly at her. Lena felt her stomach drop. She turned and walked toward the registers, her pace quick but controlled. She did not want to run. She did not want to show him that she was afraid. She was in aisle 7 when she heard the breathing. It was close, very close, just behind her right shoulder, less than a foot away. A slow, deep, deliberate inhalation, the kind of breath you take through your nose when you are trying to smell something, when you are trying to identify something by its scent. Lena spun around. No one was there. The aisle stretched out behind her, empty shelves, products in perfect rows, the fluorescent lights humming overhead. No one, nothing. She stood there, her heart hammering so hard she could feel it in her throat, and she looked in both directions. The aisle was completely clear. She was alone. She turned back and kept walking, faster now, her fingers white around the bottle of conditioner. She was 2 aisles away from the register when she glanced down and saw him. He was crouching behind her cart. Darren Hale, though she did not know his name yet, was on his hands and knees behind the metal frame of her shopping cart, his face level with her waist, and he was inhaling. Long, slow, deliberate breaths through his nose, his nostrils flaring, his eyes half closed as though he were tasting the air around her body, her skin, her hair. Lena screamed. She did not remember screaming. She did not remember dropping the conditioner or stumbling backward or knocking into a display of paper towels. She only remembered the sound of running footsteps, shoes slapping against linoleum, and then a hand on her arm pulling her away, and a man's voice saying her name, though she did not know how he knew it. It was one of the night shift employees, a young man named Derek who had heard the scream from 3 aisles over and come running. By the time police arrived, Darren Hale was sitting on the floor of aisle 7 with his hands zip-tied behind his back, staring at the ceiling with an expression of absolute calm. He did not resist. He did not speak. He simply sat there, breathing slowly, his eyes drifting around the store as though he were memorizing it. The officer who ran his name went pale. Darren Hale had been arrested before, at this exact store, in this exact aisle, twice. The first time was 11 years ago. The second time was 6 years after that. The officer pulled up the booking photos on his tablet and showed them to Derek, who had stayed to give his statement. Derek stared at the photos for a long time, 3 photographs, taken years apart, and then he looked up at the officer with an expression that the officer would later describe as like he had seen a ghost. The photographs showed the same man, the same face, the same build, the same flat, empty expression. 11 years, and Darren Hale had not aged a single day. Clapper bored if what just happened to Lena Morris made your skin crawl. If you are reading this in the dark and you just checked over your shoulder, then you are not ready for what comes next. Hit that like button, subscribe, a comment, and tell me, would you keep working ATRAVNWOD? Because the next story is worse, much worse. Do not go anywhere. Story 2, the woman who stole with her body. Mrs. Caldwell had been coming into Ravenwood Hypermart for weeks before anyone noticed anything wrong. She was an elderly woman, mid-70s, maybe older, small, thin, dressed always in the same dark cardigan and long skirt, her white hair pulled back in a tight bun. She moved through the store slowly, deliberately, as though each step required careful calculation. She carried a reusable shopping bag, the canvas kind with the frayed handles, and she filled it with small items. Soap, batteries, packets of seeds, nothing expensive, nothing that would attract attention. What attracted attention was everything else she did. The first thing the employees noticed was the mirrors. Ravenwood Hypermart had mirrors in the cosmetics section, full-length mirrors mounted on the end caps so customers could check how products looked on them. Mrs. Caldwell avoided every single one. She walked around them with a wide berth, her eyes fixed on the floor, her body angled away from any reflective surface. When she passed the polished metal shelving in the cleaning supply aisle, shelving that cast a dim, warped reflection, she pressed herself against the opposite wall and moved along it like a shadow. I noticed it first on a Wednesday. I was restocking the paper goods when I saw her at the end of aisle 4, frozen in place, staring at a small mirror that one of the cosmetics displays had been set up with. She was not looking into the mirror. She was looking at the edge of it, her head tilted, her lips moving. She was whispering. Not to herself, not the way people sometimes mutter when they are thinking or distracted. She was whispering to something. Her lips moved in a pattern, the same phrase, repeated over and over, and her eyes were fixed on a point just beyond the mirror's edge, as though she were addressing someone standing just out of frame. I watched her for almost a full minute before she turned and walked away, and I did not hear a single word she said. The second thing the employees noticed was the reflection. It was caught on camera, the security footage from the cosmetics section, timestamped 9:58 p.m. on a Thursday night. Mrs. Caldwell was standing in front of one of the full-length mirrors, examining a bottle of hand lotion. In the mirror, her reflection stood behind her, but it was delayed. Not by much, a fraction of a second. Enough that when Mrs. Caldwell tilted her head to read the label, her reflection held its position for just a beat longer before following. When she turned to walk away, the reflection turned a half-second later, and in that half-second, in that tiny sliver of time, it turned its head the other way. Toward the camera, The footage was reviewed by the store manager. He watched it 4 times. Then he watched it a 5th time with the volume turned up, because in the background, barely audible beneath the ambient noise of the store, there was a sound. A low, wet sound, like something swallowing. The manager did not report the footage. He did not explain why. The third thing, the thing that ended it, happened on a Saturday night. Mrs. Caldwell was in aisle 7. I was at the end of the aisle when I saw her bend down as though she were tying her shoe. She stayed down for several seconds, too long for a shoe tie, even for an elderly woman moving slowly. When she straightened up, she adjusted her cardigan, pulling it tighter around her midsection, and I noticed that the fabric moved differently than it had when she walked in. It was heavier, fuller, as though something had been added to the space underneath it. I watched her move toward the register. She set her canvas bag on the belt, a few small items, nothing unusual, and paid. The cashier bagged her groceries and handed them over, and Mrs. Caldwell walked toward the exit. I followed her. I did not know why. Something about the way she moved, that slow, deliberate gait, the way she kept one arm pressed against her side, made me uneasy in a way I could not articulate. I followed her to the door and watched her cross the parking lot toward a car that had been parked in the farthest corner, away from the lights. I went back inside and told the shift manager what I had seen. They brought her back in. The confrontation happened near the entrance, under the harsh white light of the overhead fixtures. Mrs. Caldwell stood very still while the manager spoke to her, her hands folded in front of her expression calm and patient, as though she were waiting for a bus. When they asked her to open her cardigan, she did so without hesitation. Inside, tucked into a girdle-like arrangement of fabric she had fashioned beneath her clothing, pressed against her stomach and ribs and wrapped around her torso, were 14 items. Small things: a bottle of vitamins, a packet of batteries, a roll of tape, a tin of mints, a small figurine from the home decor section. Items that had been taken from shelves throughout the store over the course of weeks, hidden against her body, carried out past the registers without a single alarm triggering. The manager stared at the items laid out on the floor between them. 14 items, spread across her body like organs. "Why?" he asked. Mrs. Caldwell looked up at him. Her expression did not change. Her voice was thin and reedy and perfectly calm. "It told me to take them," she said. The manager blinked. "Who told you?" Mrs. Caldwell's eyes drifted past him, past his shoulder, toward the interior of the store, toward aisle 7, and something shifted in her expression. Something that looked like fear, but old fear. The kind of fear that had been living inside her for a long time and had become familiar. "It doesn't like empty spaces," she said. The police arrived 12 minutes later. Mrs. Caldwell went with them quietly. She did not resist. She did not argue. As they led her toward the exit, she turned her head and looked back at the store, at the fluorescent lights, at the shelves, at the long, dark mouth of aisle 7 stretching into the interior of the building, and her lips began to move again, whispering the same phrase over and over. No one could hear what she said. But the lights in aisle 7 flickered twice as she walked out the door. Story 3: The Drug Incident. Raina Voss moved through Ravenwood Hypermart, like water moving through cracks in stone. She was young, mid-20s, with sharp features and dark circles under her eyes that spoke of either insomnia or something worse. She wore oversized clothes, a hoodie 3 sizes too large, the sleeves pulled down over her hands, joggers, worn sneakers. She looked at first glance like someone who had not slept in days and had come to the store on autopilot, guided by some basic biological need for food or warmth, or simply the comfort of being in a public space. But she was not on autopilot. She was calculating. I watched her on the cameras for 40 minutes before I understood what she was doing. She entered through the main doors and immediately turned left, away from the registers, away from the entrance cameras, into the deeper interior of the store. She moved along the wall, staying close to the shelving units, her head down, her hands in her pockets. At each intersection between aisles, she paused, just for a second. Her eyes flicked upward to the ceiling, to the corners, to the places where the security cameras were mounted, and then she moved on. She knew where every camera was. Not approximately, not generally. She knew their exact positions, their exact angles, their exact blind spots. She moved through the store like a ghost navigating a labyrinth, slipping from one dead zone to the next with a precision that was almost mechanical. When she reached an aisle, she positioned herself behind a shelf unit, placing her body exactly where the camera's field of view ended. When she moved between aisles, she timed her movements to coincide with the rotation of the one mobile camera on the floor, a small unit on wheels that swept the perimeter every 12 minutes. She crossed its path during the 4-second gap between sweeps. It was flawless. It was also wrong. No one memorizes a camera layout like that. No one moves through a space with that kind of inhuman precision unless they have studied it obsessively, or unless someone or something has told them exactly where to go. She blocked 2 aisles with shopping carts, positioned them at angles that created a corridor, a narrow, enclosed space that the cameras could not see into from any angle. Inside this corridor, she worked quickly. Her hands moved with a speed and sureness that did not match the rest of her body, the trembling fingers, the darting eyes, the way she flinched at every distant sound. She took items from the shelves and tucked them into her hoodie, into her joggers, into places that should not have been able to hold what she put into them. She was arrested at the self-checkout. The loss prevention officer, a stocky man named Paul who had worked at Ravenwood for 6 years and had seen everything, confronted her near the exit. Raina did not run. She did not fight. She simply stopped walking and turned to face him, and her expression was not the expression of someone who had been caught stealing. It was the expression of someone who had been interrupted in the middle of a conversation. "I need to finish," she said. Her voice was flat, distant. Her eyes were not focused on Paul. They were focused on something behind him, something in the interior of the store, somewhere in the direction of aisle 7. Paul escorted her to the back office and called the police. Raina sat in the plastic chair across from the manager's desk and did not move. She did not fidget. She did not look around the room. She stared at a fixed point on the wall, and her lips moved, not whispering exactly but forming words, responding to something, a conversation that only she could hear. The police arrived, 2 officers. They put her in the back of the cruiser and drove toward the station. Halfway there, Officer Martinez, the one in the back seat with Raina, radioed dispatch. Control, this is Unit 14. I need to report something unusual with the suspect." "Go ahead, Unit 14. Martinez paused. In the background of the transmission, there was a sound faint, distorted by the radio signal but unmistakable. A second voice. Not Martinez, not Raina. A third voice, low and wet and close to the microphone, as though it were sitting in the car with them. "She's talking to someone back here," Martinez said. "There's a voice. I can't explain it. There's another voice in this vehicle." Dispatch asked him to repeat. Martinez did not repeat. The transmission cut out. When Unit 14 arrived at the station 4 minutes later, Martinez was sitting in the driver's seat, white-faced and silent. Raina was in the back seat, perfectly calm, her lips still moving. When they processed her at the station, the intake officer noticed the marks on her arms. They were not scars, they were not tattoos. They were symbols, thin, dark lines scratched into the skin of her forearms in patterns that repeated and overlapped, covering the area from her wrists to her elbows. They looked old, weeks old at least, but the skin around them showed no signs of healing, no scabbing, no inflammation, as though they had appeared fully formed, already closed, already part of her body. During the intake interview, Raina was asked where the symbols had come from. She looked at the officer for the first time, really looked at him. with a clarity that cut through the fog of her expression like a beam of light through smoke, and she said, "The store speaks." She said it simply, plainly, the way you might say the sky is blue or the water is cold. "It has been speaking to me for 11 days, she continued. "It told me where to walk, where to look, what to take. It told me the cameras, it told me everything." The officer asked her what the store said. Raina's eyes drifted toward the window, toward the direction of Ravenwood Hypermart, miles away across the city, and her expression changed. The clarity faded. The fog returned. And beneath it, beneath the exhaustion and the fear and the hollowed-out look of someone who had not slept properly in days, there was something else. Something that looked like grief. "It's hungry," she said. "It's always hungry." Story 4: The Death of Harry. Harold Cole, Harry, to everyone who knew him, was 67 years old and had been the greeter at Ravenwood Hypermart for 4 years. He stood just inside the entrance every morning at 7:00 a.m. with a smile that was genuine and warm and utterly disarming. He greeted every customer by name if he knew them, and with a cheerful good morning if he did not. He wore a blue polo shirt with the store logo on the chest and a lanyard around his neck, and his white hair was always neatly combed, and he smelled faintly of the butterscotch candies he kept in a small dish on the folding table beside him. Harry was, by any measure, a good man. He had been a teacher for 32 years before he retired. Elementary school, 4th grade. He had coached Little League and volunteered at the food bank and visited his wife's grave every Sunday with fresh flowers, even in winter, even when the ground was frozen and the cemetery was empty except for him and the wind. He loved the job at Ravenwood. He told me once during a break in the back room over coffee that he liked the routine of it, the predictability, the simple daily act of making people feel welcome when they walked through the door. He said it gave him a purpose, something to get up for in the morning. I asked him once if the store ever made him uncomfortable, if he ever felt, and I chose my words carefully, like something was off, like something was wrong with the place. Harry laughed, a warm, easy laugh that filled the break room. "Son," he said, "I have spent 32 years in schools full of children. Nothing in this store is going to scare me." He believed that, genuinely, completely believed it. Harry was wrong. It happened on a Thursday afternoon in March. The store was busy, not packed, but busy enough that there were people in most of the aisles, enough movement and noise that the paranormal undercurrents of the place were muffled, buried beneath the ordinary sounds of commerce. Lucas Brandt had been shoplifting at Ravenwood for months. He was not subtle about it. He was not clever or careful or strategic the way Raina Voss had been. Lucas Brandt was aggressive. He took what he wanted, openly, brazenly, daring anyone to stop him. He had been confronted before. He had been asked to leave. He had been banned from the store twice and had come back both times as though the ban were a joke, as though the store itself were pulling him back. On this particular Thursday, Lucas was in aisle 7. I was in aisle 6, restocking the canned vegetables when I heard the confrontation begin. Lucas's voice, loud, hostile, slurred, echoing off the shelves. A manager's voice, calm but firm, asking him to put the items back. Lucas's laugh. A crash, something falling off a shelf. I put down the cans and moved to the end of the aisle to see what was happening. Lucas Brandt was a large man, broad, heavy. He moved through the store the way a bulldozer moves through a construction site, without regard for anything in his path. He was holding a case of beer under one arm and a bottle of liquor in his free hand, and he was shouting at the manager, who stood between him and the exit with his hands raised, trying to de-escalate. I stepped in to help. Lucas turned on me. I do not remember the exact sequence of events. I remember his fist. I remember the floor. I remember the taste of blood and the ringing in my ears, and the way the fluorescent lights above me seemed to pulse and dim and pulse again, as though the store itself were reacting to what was happening inside it. I was on the ground for less than 10 seconds. But in those 10 seconds, Harry Cole walked out the front entrance to check on the commotion in the parking lot. Lucas Brand had gotten outside. He had gotten to his car, and he had backed out of his parking space without looking. Harry was standing in the crosswalk. The car hit him at approximately 15 miles per hour. It was not fast. By any objective measure, it was not fast, but it was enough. More than enough for a 67-year-old man with thin bones and a body that had been slowing down for years. Harry went down. I saw it from the doorway. I had just gotten back on my feet, blood running from my lip, and I turned toward the entrance just in time to see Harry's body fold, not fall, fold like a marionette whose strings had been cut all at once. He hit the concrete and did not move. The world went silent. Not quiet, silent, the way it had been silent in the parking lot when Lena Morris had walked in on that Tuesday night. Absolute, total, as though every sound in the universe had been switched off at once, and the only thing left was the image of Harry Cole lying on the ground in front of the store he loved, and the butterscotch candies that had spilled from his pocket and were rolling across the concrete in the cold March air. Harry Cole died 11 days later in a hospital room. Internal bleeding, organ damage. The doctors used words like extensive and irreparable and inconsistent with the reported speed of impact. That last phrase stayed with me. Inconsistent, as though the damage to Harry's body did not match what should have been caused by a slow-moving car in a parking lot. As though something else had been involved. The store changed after Harry died. I do not know how to explain it in a way that sounds rational because it is not rational, but the employees felt it, all of us, independently without discussing it. The atmosphere shifted. The baseline wrongness of the place, the thing that had always been there, humming beneath the surface like a second heartbeat, intensified. It was no longer subtle. It was no longer something you could dismiss or rationalize or chalk up to sleep deprivation and stress. It was present, it was active, and it was no longer hiding. The doors in the back of the store began opening by themselves. Not the main entrance, not the automatic doors at the front. The interior doors, the ones that led to the stockroom, to the loading bay, to the maintenance corridors that ran behind the walls of the aisles. Heavy doors with push-bar handles that required deliberate force to open. They opened on their own, slowly, silently. And they stayed open until someone closed them manually, at which point they would open again minutes later as though the store were breathing, inhaling, exhaling. At Harry's old spot, just inside the entrance, where his folding table and his dish of butterscotch candies had been, there were footsteps. Not visible footsteps, no marks on the floor, no dust disturbed, but audible footsteps, the sound of shoes on linoleum, steady and unhurried, packing back and forth in the exact pattern Harry had walked during his shifts. Back and forth, every night between 7:00 p.m. and closing. The footsteps of a man who was no longer there, walking the route of a man who had loved his job in a store that had taken him from it. The children noticed it first. Parents brought their kids into Ravenwood on weekend mornings, toddlers in shopping carts, small children holding their parents' hands, running ahead down the aisles with the boundless energy of the very young. Some of these children on some of these mornings would stop. They would go quiet. They would look toward the back of the store, toward aisle 7, toward the deep interior where the cameras flickered and the air smelled of wet earth, and they would wave. Not at their parents, not at other customers, at something else. Something in the shadows at the back of the store that the adults could not see. Sometimes they smiled when they waved. Sometimes they did not. The cameras glitched at 11:47 p.m. every night. This had been happening for as long as anyone could remember, long before Harry's death, long before any of the incidents I have described. But after Harry died, the glitches changed. Before, the footage would simply cut to static white noise, meaningless, easily dismissed as a technical malfunction. After, the static resolved. For exactly 3 seconds every single night, the cameras showed something. A shape, a tall, dark shape standing in aisle 7, featureless, motionless, simply present the way a wall is present or a door is present, as though it had always been there and the cameras had only just begun to acknowledge it. I began investigating the history of the building. It took me 2 weeks of evenings spent in the county records office and online archives, public records, property deeds, historical surveys, newspaper clippings digitized and uploaded to databases that no one ever searched. Ravenwood Hypermart was built in 1994 on a plot of land that had previously been designated as industrial wasteland. Before that, before the lot was cleared and graded and paved, it had been something else entirely. From 1891 to 1962, the site had housed the Ravenwood State Asylum, a psychiatric facility, one of the largest in the region, housing, at its peak, over 400 patients. It burned down in 1962 under circumstances that the official report described as undetermined. 41 people died in the fire. The bodies of 22 of them were never recovered. Before the asylum, the land had been used as a cemetery. I found the records. The cemetery had been in operation from 1834 to 1889. Over 2,000 people were buried there. When the land was sold and rezoned for the asylum's construction, the graves were supposed to have been relocated. The paperwork said they were. Every grave, every body, every marker moved to a new cemetery on the other side of the county. But I found a second set of records. A memo from the county clerk's office, dated 1891, marked as an internal communication. It was handwritten and it said simply, "Relocation incomplete. Estimate 400 plus remains still on site. Decision made to proceed with construction. Cost of full relocation deemed prohibitive. File sealed." 400 bodies, still in the ground, still beneath the concrete and the linoleum and the fluorescent lights, beneath the aisles and the shelves and the products and the cameras. Beneath aisle 7. I sat with that information for a long time. I sat with it and I thought about everything, about Darren Hale and his unchanging face, about Mrs. Caldwell and her whispered conversations, about Raina Voss and the symbols on her skin and the voice in the police car, about Harry Cole and the way his body had folded on the concrete, about the footsteps and the doors and the children waving at nothing. And then I thought about myself. I pulled up the incident reports, all of them, every documented event at Ravenwood Hypermart going back to the store's opening in 1994. Every theft, every assault, every police call, every anomaly that had been reported and logged in the system. I went through them one by one, and I found my name. Not in every report, but in enough of them, enough to form a pattern. I had been on shift during the Darren Hale incident. I had been on shift during Mrs. Caldwell. I had been present in the store, on the floor, within the building, during every single significant event that had occurred at Ravenwood Hypermart in the 3 years I had worked there. Every one. Not by coincidence, not by bad luck, by design. I was there because the store needed me there. Because whatever lives beneath the concrete and the linoleum and the 400 graves, whatever has been feeding on the darkness and the fear and the violence that this place generates, it needed a witness. It needed someone to see, someone to watch, someone to record, someone to tell the story. I do not know why it chose me. I do not know what I am supposed to do with this knowledge or whether knowing it changes anything at all. I do not know if I can leave. I have tried twice to quit. Both times something stopped me, not physically, not with threats or force, with something quieter, a feeling deep and cold that if I walked away, something worse would happen, to someone, to me, to someone I care about. I do not know if that feeling is real, or if the store is making me feel it. I am not sure there is a difference. Tonight I am back on shift. I will walk through those automatic doors at 10, 11:00 p.m. The fluorescent lights will hum. The air will be cold and carry that smell, wet earth, old and deep. The cameras will glitch at 11:47, and for 3 seconds the shape in aisle 7 will appear on the footage, and I will watch it, the way I always do, and I will write down what I see. And somewhere in the back of the store, in the place where 400 people are buried beneath the floor, something will stir. Something that has been waiting. Something that is always waiting. And it will know I am here. You have reached the end of this story, but have you really? Think about it. The next time you walk into a store night, any store, and the parking lot is too quiet, and the air feels wrong, and something makes you look over your shoulder. That feeling is real. Like this video, subscribe to this channel, and leave a comment below with one word, RAVNWOOD. Because if enough of you say it, it might hear you.